Entrepreneur is an individual who creates a new business, bearing most of the risks and enjoying most of the rewards. Entrepreneur is commonly seen as an innovator, a source of new ideas, goods, services, and business. Merging entrepreneurship with agriculture, this aims to provide information and guidance for technology dissemination, crop protection, market trends, prices of crops in the market, availability of inputs and its supply, and many more. Today, we have with us the program manager of Startup X Foundry, Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, a dedicated and known personality in the field, to enlighten you and to share his experience and knowledge on the topic of aligning entrepreneurship to solve large agri problems. Having an opportunity for a quick conversation with Mr. Gunasekara this morning, he shared a valuable quote from Professor Howard Stevenson of Harvard Business School, which is that entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. With that good note, I would like to hand over the platform to you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Daisy. Thank you very much. So a warm good morning for all of you who are joining in, and I'm joining you from Gampala, out of all the places, because work from home, procedures, so on and so forth. All right. So before this, let me just share my screen with you guys. Okay, give me a moment. Right. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about aligning entrepreneurship to solve large agri problems. This is actually something that's very, very close to my heart. I've been talking to a lot of people about this, about how we can align agriculture to figure out what needs to be done. And of course, I've been talking about a lot of the things that can be done in terms of Sri Lanka being a very small country, and how we can take things forward in a meaningful manner so that we don't have to deal with a lot of the adverse effects that can happen in the next few years. Now, yes, I mean, the moment you talk about food or agriculture for that matter, you're always thinking about, bountifulness. Then, of course, you're thinking about food availability. And then, of course, once in a while, you do come across malnutrition, so on and so forth. And these are, of course, part and parcel of the same thing, and it goes in a sort of a spectrum. So the deal about this whole process of agriculture, or for that matter, agribusinesses, or for that matter, okay, the whole premise of this food chain that we have right now is that today, more than any time before, we have malnutrition and, of course, obesity happening within a few kilometers in any given country. And that means you have a massive problem in terms of how you take the food out to the market and what's available for people. And this is especially true when it comes to, say, countries like India or China, where you have massive amounts of people. And I'm going to talk about a lot of these things, and I'm going to talk about how all these things can be converted into opportunities so that you can solve meaningful problems and also make some money out of it. So let me dig into my presentation. Okay. So the world is a really, really big place. So for in terms of this discussion, I'm going to focus on South Asia, which is our region, Southeast Asia, which is adjacent to us. So it's essentially countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, so on and so forth. Then I'm going to talk about East Asia. This is essentially like China, Mongolia, Japan, so on and so forth. Middle East. So all these countries in the Middle East, like United Arab Emirates to Iran, Iraq, so on and so forth. And of course, I'm going to focus on Africa as well. Now, there are few reasons why I wanted to focus on these few regions. So the first one is the population that we have in these regions. So if you look at the world population increase by 1 billion, it took us, it took us about all of the human history up to 1803. That's when we had 1 million people. And then the time it took to bring this 1 billion people up, we increased the population by 1 billion, increasingly got decreased. So all of human history up to 1803, 1 billion people. It took 124 years after that for us to increase the population by another 1 billion, so on and so forth. Now, contrary to the popular belief, our population increment has decreased. So we are not increasing our world population, global population by as much we used to. So we had the most number of population growth, especially during the baby boomer ages. That is from 1960s to about 1999. This is when the baby boomers, they had a lot of children. Now, this is changing quite rapidly, not rapidly. It is changing systematically. So it took us so it took about 12 years to come from 6 billion to 7 billion people. And now it's going to increase to 13 years to increase that number from 7 billion to 8 billion people. Now, these numbers are projections, but you get what I mean. So from that point onwards, we are going to increase the number of years that's going to take for us to reach the next billion people. Now, this is really important. Why so? I'll come to it. Now, one of the biggest things that you have to understand is this increment of world population happens mostly in Asia. That's the region that I talked about, South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, so on and so forth, and in Africa. So as a percentage of the world population, this is more than 70%. So that means we have a lot of different requirements that's happening in our regions, especially when it comes to food, especially when it comes to agriculture. Now, when we talk about agriculture, it's not only about whatever that we grow. It is all about what we rear as well in terms of livestock. I'll come to it. Now, one of the biggest things that you also have to identify is that our region, like Asian region and African region, has a lot of people in the middle class coming up. No, this is really important. Now, I could be the oldest person in this audience, but if I think about when I was little, it's very rarely that we had chicken for any of our meals. It usually was probably, twice a week or probably even less. It was actually an occasion when we had chicken for any sort of meal. But right now things have changed. Like, I can't think of not having some sort of a meat for any of my meals. So things have changed a lot. And I'm sure it's the same case with you guys as well. Why this is so is our income levels has expanded, and because of that we are now looking for finer things in life, better things in life. And one of the biggest things is when your lifestyle improves because of the amount of earnings that you have, you are also seeking better proteins. So it's happening pretty much across the world right now. So if you take like an advanced market like Europe or North America, their meal is heavily consistent of uh, animal proteins. Why? Because they have the capacity to spend on it, And at the same time, okay, they're willing to spend on it because they like the taste. And of course, that's a part of human evolution. Now, what's happening in our region is that, okay, 88% of the next billion entrants to the middle class will be in Asia. And what happens as a result of that is we will be seeking more and more animal proteins. So this is going to be a very, very interesting thing that's going to happen. I'll come to why it's important as well. Now, moving on. Yeah. So here are the biggest problems that we are going to face in our regions. So we are going to have a massive water crisis. It's happening right now. So if you go to, you don't have to go too far for this. Okay, you just have to go to Chennai. Chennai's water table right now is very, very small. Like they have already run out of water, and they are now thinking of how to convert their wastewater into clean drinking water. You go to, let's say, a place like Cape Town, they are facing the same problem. So to the level that they are rationing the water issued per person per day. You go to Australia, you go to any large city in Australia, they have the same problem. Water table is a massive problem for our region. And this is more so in a certain way that I will be talking about in a later slide. Now, we have the water crisis going on, and in Sri Lanka also we are facing that problem because we have a lot of deforestation happening, and we have a lot of requirement that's coming up because we are looking for like more meat, more plant-based proteins, and we are looking for like better quality of life, so on and so forth. And one of the first things that get affected because of this is our water table. So we are looking at a massive water crisis that's going to happen in the near future, and for some countries it's already happening. Now, the second one is overpopulation. Now, especially in Asia and Africa, like I said, about 70% of the global population is living in these regions. And what we do is we procreate because we have a lot of young people. If you take a country like Bangladesh, sorry, if you take a country like Pakistan, about 65% of all their population is under the age of 27. That means they are going to get married, they are going to have more children, so on and so forth. So overpopulation is going to be a massive problem in our region. And what also happens is, now this is an indication of growth, like economic growth. One of the biggest components of economic growth is increasing urban population. Now, in Sri Lanka, we don't see that that much because the only sort of urban center that we have is Colombo. So I don't know about you guys, but I hail from Kampala, and I had to come to Colombo to do a job. I don't think of it too much, but then again, okay, you really look at what's happening in Sri Lanka. Most of the people who want to do a better job, they definitely have to come to Colombo because no other jobs are available anywhere else. And likewise, and I had to move from Gampil to Colombo, but at the same time, there's so much of people who moved from other outstation to Kandy just because that okay, all their jobs are available in Kandy. Likewise, this is happening now. In Sri Lanka, we are a very small country and we have a very small population, only 21 million people. But you go to, let's say, forget about a country like India. Let's just focus on a town like Mumbai. Now, the Mumbai population is about 23 million people. So it's the city population is more than the Sri Lankan population. And they have a lot of people moving in to Mumbai. And as a result, what happens is they have a massive, massive demand for food. They have a massive, massive demand for plant-based food as well as animal-based food. And this keeps increasing because we are talking about 23 million people. And if you consider, let's say, like that number increases by 0.5% every year, you're still looking at a massive number. Now, it's obviously more than 0.5%. So overpopulation is happening because we procreate more. And at the same time, we have a lot of urban population happening. And as a result of that, what happens is you have two problems. One, you have a food crisis that's happening, but at the same time, you have a massive water crisis that's also happening because the more people you have, the more supplies they require, so on and so forth. The third one, this is something that I touched on, is that we actually seek better food. So more people in the middle class means that, okay, they are looking for a better lifestyle. And of course, they are more importantly looking for more protein. And these are the biggest problems in terms of how um, the macro angle of this whole thing works. Now, understanding this is really important because this also relates to the availability of resources as well. Because if you want to get into agriculture, that means, okay, you have to think about the water crisis that's happening. If you get into agriculture, you also have to think about the land grab that's happening. So if you want to do something related to agriculture, you definitely have to think about, okay, how do I cultivate something? Maybe in an urban setting with like sort of a greenhouse sort of a thing, or how do you cultivate something outside of the urban population centers, so on and so forth. And you also have to think, okay, how do I get a better return for whatever the investment that I make? So these things are like really important. Now moving on, and this is something really important. Remember I told you about why this protein necessity is creating a problem. So if you look at, let's say, beef, so to produce a kilo of beef, the water consumption required is something like 15,415 liters. It could vary depending on like where you look at, but an average would be something like this. A kilo of chicken takes 4,325 liters. Now this includes the amount, I mean, at a certain point, right? Okay, so beef has been like a living, breathing animal. So that animal has to sustain. So this is why, and of course, how that animal sustains is by eating something. And how do you do that? So you have to cultivate, let's say, wheat, or you have to cultivate some sort of a legume so that uh, the animal could survive. So that means, okay, so your value chain requires two aspects. First of all, you need to cultivate something so that the animal could eat, and then you convert the animal to meat, and then you consume it. So there's a massive process in this whole chain, and at each step of the way you consume a lot of water, and that's actually creating a massive problem. So these are things that you have to be very, very mindful of when you're thinking about how to approach this agri businesses, and of course how do you approach this food problem. Now moving on, um, so talked about the problems. Now I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship, and at a later stage I'm going to combine how these problems can be solved with entrepreneurship. Now like Dinti mentioned, sorry, uh, as it was mentioned, what I this is actually something that I gave. So entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. So this is perhaps the most profound um, explanation that I believe in when it comes to entrepreneurship. So it's given by Professor Howard Stevenson from Harvard Business School. Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that, okay, we are not talking about businesses. Okay, so this is going to be very important at a later stage. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. Now, let us dig into like why this is important. And you obviously see that I have highlighted certain words. I'll come to it. Now, pursuit. Pursuit implies a singular, relentless focus. And this is something that entrepreneurs definitely need to have because they usually have a very short window of opportunity. Now, one of the biggest things is they need to show tangible progress. Otherwise, other people don't take them seriously. In um, startup context, this usually means that, okay, you will have a bunch of people who are creating startups, and then you will want to impress a bunch of investors who have limited resources of cash, or you want to impress a bunch of developers who are limited resources by themselves, so on and so forth. So entrepreneurs definitely need to show tangible progress. Otherwise, they are going to their ventures are going to die down. And this is why it's very common to have a lot of startups die for every startup that survives. The number is usually like 1 in 10 startups usually die, which is quite true, especially when it comes to resource-strapped um, countries like ours. Now, in terms of pursuit, uh, entrepreneurs usually have a massive sense of urgency that is seldom seen in established organizations. So any opportunity is a part of a portfolio and resources are more ready. Yeah, for organizations, the deal is opportunity is a part of a portfolio. So imagine if it's a large company like John Keel's. So what they would want to do is, okay, they would look at some sort of opportunity and they will have the resources available to them to make use of that opportunity. And of course, just because that they are a large company, they have a lot of resources available to them in terms of human capital, in terms of investment, so on and so forth. But if you are a single entrepreneur, the amount of stuff available to you is actually quite low. So that actually creates a lot of problems for you as an entrepreneur who's trying to do something that's meaningful. So this pursuit is important in that sense. So again, um, perceives a short window of opportunity, and of course, it talks about limited amount of resources. Now, the second aspect of it is opportunity. Now, in terms of entrepreneurship, there are 4 things that we usually talk about in terms of an opportunity. So, you create an opportunity by pioneering a truly innovative product. So, this could be, for example, uh, the SpaceX rocket. Because Elon Musk through SpaceX figured out that okay, it's quite wasteful to send a rocket to the space and have that discarded after that. So he spent a lot of money to figure out okay how can he through his company through SpaceX can send a rocket to the space and bring the same thing back so that you can keep reusing it. First few experiments obviously failed, but right now he has a really, really good working model where now the success of that rocket is quite consistent. So you create an opportunity by pioneering a really innovative product. Number two is you devise a new business model. And this is quite common. So how do you devise a new business model? You figure out, okay, how you can make money out of a given opportunity. So there are so many opportunities that we know of. For example, in Sri Lanka, the most common business models are like trading. So you buy something from someone and then you sell that to someone else. And in the interim, you make some money. Or what you do is, okay, you create something on your own and then you try to sell it. So that's how you make some money out of it. And then you have a service model. For example, you know a lot about social media management and how to do this properly and how to do analytics. And you collect all that information and your knowledge and you provide a service to someone. And then for providing that service, you get some money out of it. So these are not new business models. These are business models that are already available. Now, how do you create a new business model? Now, one of the biggest things in terms of new business models is the importance of IP, intellectual property. And most of you guys are students who have some sort of a capacity to create a lot of intellectual property. So my suggestion to you would be, forget about Agri for a moment. My suggestion to you is figure out how you can create more intellectual property, and there are more ways you can make money out of it. So coming back to our Agri problem. The third way you can create an opportunity is by creating a better or a cheaper version of an existing product. Now, let's think about it for a moment. Now, one of the biggest issues that we are facing right now is, especially in Sri Lanka, is that our crop yield is actually quite low. And also we have a massive problem of post-harvest um, post-harvest waste, which also needs to be sorted. So if you figure out how to make more food in the same land space, or if you figure out how we can save more food that we have created through limiting the post-harvest waste, we are going to have a better version and also a cheaper version of an existing product. So my suggestion to you would be, as people who are interested in agri-related businesses, is look at the numbers and try to figure out how more can be saved, or how you can make more of whatever the agricultural products in the same space of land. Now, the fourth one is targeting an existing product to a new sets of customers. Now, this is quite obvious. For example, now we like our Sri Lankan food, right? And you only realize how good Sri Lankan food is when you go to a different country and try to taste their food, and you're like, okay, this sucks, because it doesn't have the same sort of complexity that we have in the Sri Lankan food, so on and so forth. And then you introduce your friends to the Sri Lankan food, and they're like, yes, this is mind-blowing good, right? So this is a classic example of targeting an existing product to a new set of customers. So if you can introduce, let's say, the Sri Lankan food to people who are living outside of Sri Lanka, they're going to love it. And this is one of the reasons why we also like, say, Indian food, you know, Chinese food, so on and so forth. It's a cuisine which is very different to us, but then again, we like that just because the taste is different, and of course, it tastes better. So we like to have that, different sort of taste happening to us. Now, the deal about all these opportunities is that, okay, this is not exhaustive. I just talked about 4 different things which are mostly available out there. And these are not mutually exclusive. So a new venture might employ a new business model for an innovative product. So you have the innovation happening on one side, you have a new business model happening on the other side. So this again, okay, so these are things that you have to keep in mind. So I'm just giving you a very, very brief understanding of what entails in terms of entrepreneurship, and specifically with opportunity. Now, moving on. This last statement is really important. Beyond resources controlled. So this obviously implies resource constraints. Now, at a new venture's outset, the founders control only their human, social, and financial capital. So this is a bit of a problem, because they only have access to only so much of limited resources, and they want to do something out of that so that they can seek better resources later along the way. So many entrepreneurs bootstrap. This is especially true for Sri Lanka, because raising money in Sri Lanka is not that easy. So they try to keep the expenditures to a bare minimum, and they only invest their own time and their own personal funds. Now, the deal is, in some cases, this is good enough. Like, okay, so whatever that you do with your limited amount of time and limited amount of resources available in terms of funds, this is good enough for you to get to a certain point, and then you can actually raise more money, or you earn enough money so that you can manage everything in a meaningful manner. Now, the problem is, like, certain businesses that we are thinking about, they need better resources even to get off the ground, especially when it comes to agri-related products. A lot of the stuff that you can do needs a lot of scientific research, and scientific research needs a lot of money. Now, as someone who also represents investors of this country, I do see that, okay, we are not putting enough focus on investing in scientific research, especially from an investor's perspective, because as opposed to, let's say, government funding, investors are always looking for some sort of a return. Now, the deal about scientific research is that, okay, you can never ensure that, okay, you are going to create something that's meaningful, because you try to achieve something, but it doesn't mean that, okay, you are going to achieve whatever that you want to achieve through scientific research, because research can go wrong, right? So it's just like an entrepreneurial venture. But the deal with entrepreneurial ventures is that, okay, we can understand the risks. We understand, okay, look, this is what this guy is trying to do, And then this is what the eventual goal would be. And this is how we would create an exit. It is quite well said, but when it comes to research, it's not the case. So one of the problems that we are having is we need more investment, like proper investment needs to happen into research and development. We are seeing some R&D funds being allocated by private organizations, which is a really, really good trend. But we definitely need more money coming in so that we can do things more meaningfully. Now, moving on. Like I said, entrepreneurship doesn't only apply to creating businesses. Now, going back to the definition says that entrepreneurship is a pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. So it doesn't say anything about creating profits, or it doesn't say anything about creating startups or anything like that. Now, on the flip side, you have science entrepreneur. So science entrepreneur to me is someone who actually takes on a pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. So this is someone who does research. So to me, there's a science entrepreneur. There are policy entrepreneurs who actually want to change the policies so that they can come up with, let's say, better agri practices or better agricultural, or save more on post-harvest, so on and so forth. So these would be like policy entrepreneurs. Then there are agri entrepreneurs. So agri entrepreneur again is someone who's pursuing an opportunity beyond resources control. So this person might not have lands. So the only parcel of land that this agri entrepreneur has is probably, let's say, 30 purchase. That's it. And then he or she is trying to do his or her best to create a lot of value out of that 30 purchase. So how does he or she does that? Vertical farming, then new hydroponics or aquaponics, so on and so forth. Or they will try to do like a circular economy sort of thing, where and this is actually being done in Singapore right now. They are feeding a particular larvae food waste, and then of course the larvae grows, and what they do is they use this particular larvae as the fertilizer for a vertical farm that they are running. So essentially it creates sort of like a circular thing. Is a food waste fed to the larvae. Larvae fertilizes the crops that's happening within a vertical farming setup, and then people consume it, and then you have food waste. Food waste is put back into this particular vertical farm, so on and so forth. So these are agri entrepreneurs. And then there are tech entrepreneurs, and tech entrepreneurs are the people who are known the best just because of Silicon Valley. But the fact of the matter is that, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be tech entrepreneurs. You can be an agri entrepreneur, you can be a policy entrepreneur, you can be a science entrepreneur, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And the deal is, and this is one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, is that all these other types of entrepreneurs are not getting enough impetus, they are not getting enough attention, as does the tech entrepreneurs. Now, here's the kicker. For solving these large agri problems, all these types of entrepreneurs need to come together and work together. And this is really, really important, because we have so much of challenges right ahead of us. So we have a water crisis, we have overpopulation that's happening, we have people who are looking for better proteins, so on and so forth. And we have other adjacent problems where our crops are, the crop yield is quite low, and then we have post-harvest waste. So many other problems. So we cannot solve these problems by working in our individual silos. It doesn't work like that. All of us need to come together and figure out how we are going to solve these problems as a collective measure. That's how we would actually achieve something. And at the same time, investors also need to come. So it can be like institutional investment, like what happens with a venture capital firm, or like a private equity firm, so on and so forth. And we also need some funding coming in from, let's say, development agencies or donors, so that there will be some sustained ability to spend money on things that matter, so that we can actually take all these things and do something that's meaningful, not only for Sri Lanka, but also for our region, because it's the region and of course the humanity in general who's going to have all these problems that I told about. Now, moving on, let's bust some myths now, and this is also really important. Now, most people say that GMO food, that is genetically modified food, is bad for human consumption. Now, there's a really nice documentary on Netflix on this. If you can do watch it, I can't remember the name of it. Um, but in that, it says that okay, this whole genetically modified food scare came from Hawaii, and some people say that okay, this genetically modified food is really bad, so on and so forth. And there was this one particular piece of writing that's done by someone which is not peer reviewed. It's not widely accepted. And then people, pointed it out as a, hey, look, okay, GMO food is bad. Well, guess what? It's not. So what happens is, what with GMO food, like any sort of food variety can have about 30,000 to about 40,000 different genes in it. And what the technology that we have only allows us to do stuff with like about 10 different gene varieties in that. That's it. So the moment you talk about GMO food, well, the reality and the science behind it is that okay, it's not bad. There are a few things that can happen. You can have some allergies that can happen, but then again, it will only affect certain amount of population, which is like a very minor, like a very small minority, maybe even 2% or less. And there's again, okay, so there's not enough research being done in this area. Um, and then, of course, what can also happen is there's some scare. This is again not scientifically proven. There's some scare that some of the genes available outside of this genetically modified food can contaminate the GMO food, and then some weird thing could happen, and we never know whether that's going to happen or not. These are just assumptions, and I mean there are few instances of these things happening, but then again, the biggest problem is like the pesticides and the fertilizers create more problems to us than genetically modified food. And if it, I'm sure like all of you have had this so-called alternative webinara. So if you consumed one of these things, okay, you are essentially consuming genetically modified food, but you know it tastes the same. It you don't have to worry about the seeds and all that. So on and so forth. Now, why this is important is, without having genetically modified food, it would be very difficult for us to get the same sort of yields that we expect. Now, I'm not paid by any of these, large companies to come out and tell you guys that okay, genetically modified is good. No, the deal is, why genetically modified food is considered to be bad is for a few reasons. One, okay, it's expensive because most of the companies who have the money to do GMO food spend a lot of money in it, and then they have intellectual property rights, and this is why you don't have seeds in all this GMO food. It's just that they want to have the farmers buying more and more of the same seeds. It's a commercial decision, but then again, there are research organizations who have done GMO food for different reasons. For example, Swintech, so it's actually a Swintech academy, uh, actually came up with this particular rice variety where you can impregnate that rice with, if I remember right, vitamin B, because vitamin B deficiency is a massive problem in Sri Lanka. And then uh, this academic, she figured out that okay, how about we impregnate rice much the same way that we are doing it with salt, because in salt you have iodine in it, included artificially. And because that our salt has iodine in it, now we don't have iodine related issues. All the amount of iodine related issues in the country are going down just because of that. And much the same way, she wanted to create this particular rice variety where they can impregnate that rice variety with vitamin B. And that's a really good way to solve a big problem. Much the same way you can do so much of other things. Now, one of the biggest problems that we are having right now is um, most of the new rice varieties that come out of research, they give you a better yield, but then again, these are not necessarily resilient. If you take, let's say, some of the traditional rice types in Sri Lanka, Mavi or like all these like old rice types. These take about 6 months from the time that you cultivate it to take the paddy out. But all these new varieties, you can do the same thing in about three months time, right? So we need some, and but the thing is, the amount of care that you have to put for these new rice varieties is actually quite huge. You have to take care of it. But what happens with these traditional rice types is, okay, you just go out there, seed it, and that's it. You just forget about it. 6 months later, you come back and take the crop out. So we need an amalgamation of such such research happening. Like, okay, yes, we have good yield, but at the same time, the price varieties are more resilient, and we also need to think a lot more differently. I'll come to it later. Now, still on busting some myths. Okay, is meat the best way to get a good protein intake? Not really. So there are really, really good plant-based proteins which can replace meat. The only reason why we like meat is we like the taste of it. So if you take things like Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, those are like really, really good alternatives. We just need more of these products because we need to be able to replace our meat with all these plant type proteins or plant-based proteins, because the amount of water we spend on like producing this meat is way too high. We definitely need to figure out, okay, how we can create more plant-based proteins. And this creates a massive research opportunity for anyone who's listening to this presentation. If you are doing anything related to food technology, if you are doing anything related to agri-science or crop sciences, do think about these things. You definitely have a massive chance of creating something meaningful. And at the same time, you can also make a lot of money out of it. So one of the biggest things about Asia is, okay, it's a really good place to experiment. Our biodiversity is massive, and we have so much of plants that we eat. And like, you go to your ancestors, like your grandparents, and they will tell you, just they'll take a stroll in the garden and say, okay, this can be eaten, this can be eaten, this can be eaten, and you haven't even heard of these things, or you haven't even ever eaten these things. And that knowledge is being depleted because we are losing our older generation. So we need to have a way to like preserve this knowledge and figure out how we can make use of this knowledge so that we can face the problems that we are going to have in the future. And another massive thing is, we like complex tastes. As Asians, we love that. Okay, so you go to any part of India, the tastes are like very, very different from one state to the other. You come to Sri Lanka, it's the same case. You go to any part of Southeast Asia, it's the same case. You go to China, they have like different cuisines in like different parts of the country, so on and so forth. And these are like very complex tastes. And these complex tastes are things that we actually like, and also it can be recreated. And um, recreation of these tastes doesn't necessarily require you to have meat. So, is meat the best way to get a good protein intake? Not really. So, there are so many things that we can do around it. And there's so much of opportunities around it, especially as Sri Lankans, because again, we have a massive access to a lot of uh, good biodiversity. Now, moving on, agriculture is hard work. Well, so is pretty much everything else. It's just that you don't do physical work, you just do a lot of mental work. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong in doing like hard work, hard physical work, because that actually allows you to, first of all, okay, it will allow you to lose weight, and fat, that's a different story. The biggest requirement here is that we need agri entrepreneurs. So it's about time that we gave up thinking about farmers. That day and age is gone. What we need is agri entrepreneurs, and you guys are the best candidates to become agri entrepreneurs. We need you guys, especially young people, to experiment, challenge the status quo, and do agri businesses as opposed to traditional businesses, as opposed to traditional agriculture. Because the moment you talk about agriculture, there's a sort of a mental picture in your mind. about agriculture. That has to change. There are so many people that I know who are agri entrepreneurs who are doing really well, and they are doing way better than some of the tech entrepreneurs as well. So it's a sort of a thought pattern change that you need. And when you have this thought pattern change, and when you approach agri businesses like you would do with a startup business or tech startup business, a lot of things change. Right. Moving on. This is another one. Okay, so agri businesses are not profitable. Well, here's one thing I know. I mean, I have worked with a lot of people over the years. So for the last 3.5 years, I worked with about 5,000 odd entrepreneurs pretty much across the country. Due to like resource restrictions, I didn't necessarily have the time or the resources available to me to work very closely with all 5,000 of them, but I work quite closely with about 100 of them. One of the biggest things I realize is that, okay, businesses fail not just agribusiness. Most of the business fail for four reasons. One, they don't have good entrepreneurial knowledge. That is, they know what to do. Like if you take a bakery or whatever, they know how to run the bakery. They have the core knowledge of how to run a bakery, but they don't know how to manage the rest of the stuff. How to manage the people, how to manage the operations, how to manage the risk, so on and so forth. They don't know that. The more just because they don't know that, yes, the business can fail. Number two is they don't have a good enough entrepreneurial discipline. What I mean by that is one of the biggest things is okay, financial discipline. If you are one of those people who would spend money for your household expenses through the money that you get from business, and you have absolutely no idea like how much money came to the business and how much money went out, and then you bought some stuff for your home with the money that you earned through your business, rest assured, okay, you are going to have a massive problem later on. Businesses has to be managed as businesses. Your household has to be managed as a household. These are two different things. You cannot bring these two together, and this is one of the tenets of discipline. And there are so much of other discipline that most of the entrepreneurs lack: operational discipline, so on and so forth. So the third one is, okay, they have very little understanding of how to work with different organizations, and of course they have very little understand. Like when I say that, okay, all I mean is that, okay, organizations like banks, organizations like insurance companies, government, like Inland Revenue departments, so on and so forth. And the fourth one is they don't have a good understanding of what other organizations can be helpful. For example, if you are an agribusiness, you definitely need to work with ITI, that's Industrial Technology Institute. They're doing massive amounts of work. There's an organization called PGRC in Kannur, Plant Genetic Research Institute. They're doing massive amounts of work. And there is so much of other research institutes in the country. Only thing is we don't take the time to go and meet them and figure out how we can work together. This needs to change, and we need to come together and figure out, okay, what can we make use of whatever the research that they have, and how do we create value for our agribusiness. So another thing is agribusiness are profitable. You can earn good money and make positive change in the world. I have seen this happen because one of my close friends run an agribusiness here in Kampala, right? And this guy managed to so it's a fruit dehydration business that he's running. He managed to dehydrate about dehydrate about 12,000 kilos of jackfruit course during the lockdown, the first lockdown, where the lockdown was like really bad. He managed to dehydrate about 12,000 kilograms of jackfruit. Likewise, he's doing so much of stuff, and all this food is exported out of the country. So guess what? He's making tons and tons of money through that. Okay, so agribusiness are profitable. So if someone says otherwise, get to the bottom of it. It's really important. Okay, so always ask why. Like, why do you say this? And what's the reason for you to say this? Often, what happens is a lot of the people who say that, okay, agribusiness are not profitable or something of the sort haven't necessarily done agribusiness in their life. It's just that, okay, they are telling you something that someone else told them. If that's the case, challenge that and learn what's the reality of it. right, and get to the bottom of it, and then you make your own assumptions about what to do and what not to do. Now, moving, one of the biggest questions that I get is, okay, how do I start an agri business? You start an agri business much the same way that you would approach a tech startup. There's no other way around it. Okay, so we are talking about business model canvases, we are talking about value proposition canvases, we are talking about product market fit, we are talking about beachheads, we are talking about like how to use technology with a tech startup, so on and so forth. We look at Silicon Valley. You have the same approaches with agribusiness as well. So nothing changes. Only thing is, instead of you creating something on your laptop, you just go out to the field and try to figure out how you can combine natural things with technology. That's how you do it. Okay. So you have to do your research. You have to understand what needs to be done. Another important matter is you definitely need to understand how the numbers work and approach it like how you have seen how Silicon Valley startups do tech business. There's no other way around it. Only thing is you need to think a little differently. And the moment you start thinking differently, you can actually make a lot of different things happen. And you definitely have to like collaborate among a lot of people, figure out, okay, what other people are doing and how, other different approaches can be done. Now, one of the biggest problems that I see is we don't have good enough of a database approach when it comes to agribusinesses. And this is a bit of a problem because most of the knowledge is already available. Now, if you look at some of the frequent problems that we are having, especially with like agriculture produce price. If I don't know whether you guys remember this, but I think a couple of years back, we had such a massive problem with pumpkin where some of the farmers gave away pumpkin for free. And the price of pumpkin was something like 5 rupees a kilo. Now, I came across a research team in University of Rajarata where they are trying to make pumpkin flour out of excess pumpkins, which is a brilliant way to approach this problem. And likewise, okay, there are so many things that you can do if you understand the data behind it, right? And what we need to do is we need to approach this whole agribusiness concept much the same way that we approach our tech businesses. We are in tech business, we are talking about, okay, customer lifetime value. That is the amount of money a customer would spend with you over a period of time. We need to take that idea and try to apply it to the agribusiness. We are talking about CAC versus LTV, that is customer acquisition cost has to be always lower than lifetime value of the customer. And this is, branded things that's provided to you as, jargon. Like this is like jargon as common sense, nothing else. You have to apply the same things with agribusinesses. And likewise, there are so many things that you can actually learn from the tech businesses and apply with the agribusinesses. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's just that you have to change the way that you think and, of course, change the way that you execute things. Now, let me give you an example. So now this example actually comes from a company that's close to my heart. It's a company called Zipline, and what they do is they use drones to send medical supplies to like hard to reach places in the world. So this is actually a Silicon Valley startup, but they never worked in Silicon Valley when they started. So you will see what it is in the video. But this video is actually from 2018. So since 2018, these guys have now moved to US. So they did some trials with some US states to take COVID vaccines and such through their drone system. And just yesterday, they actually hired one of the development directors of Tesla to Zipline. So let's have a look at this video and let's discuss, what can be done.
company that's beating Amazon to drone deliveries. Zipline has already logged over 186,000 miles and completed more than 4,000 deliveries since 2016. The company has focused on delivering blood and life-saving medical products to hard-to-reach areas in Rwanda, but will soon expand to other developing nations and even the US.
The service that Zipline provides allows any doctor or nurse anywhere in the country to basically send a text message and get the product that they need 15 to 30 minutes later.
Like traditional logistics companies, Zipline is paid per delivery. Its drone system is 4 times faster than the average quadcopter and can serve an area 200 times as large. 1/3 of the deliveries in Rwanda were for life-critical situations.
If a patient shows up at one of the hospitals and happens to need a transfusion of that blood type, Zipline actually can deliver that specific product from our distribution center to the hospital so quickly that the patient actually doesn't know the product wasn't stocked at the hospital to begin with.
Here's how it works.
When that text message is received at the distribution center, we will immediately take that product out of our central store, load it into a box, and then that box gets placed into one of our zips, which is one of these autonomous aircraft.
Once loaded, the drone is catapulted into the air on a launcher using military-grade GPS. The drones navigate to the healthcare centers that Zipline serves and drop their package from the air on a paper parachute before returning to the distribution centers.
We're actually using an active recovery system that takes inspiration from an aircraft carrier. We're actually tracking the plane with about centimeter level accuracy. We can pluck the plane out of the air and then basically swing it down so that our flight operators can immediately grab it, load a new package, and launch it again.
Zipline will start making deliveries in the US this year as part of an FAA pilot program. The company says that it has already partnered with a number of healthcare systems, states, cities, and research institutions in the US.
Learning from Rwanda's example, the US is now moving really quickly to show how this kind of technology can save lives and be commercialized here in this country. And what's exciting is that Zipline's second generation aircraft and second generation distribution center are coming online in the next month. And they're going to make it possible for us to go from serving a small country like Rwanda at limited scale to a much larger country like the US at a scale of hundreds of millions of people.
Okay, so the whole idea is that, okay, you definitely need to approach this problem of agriculture and, of course, the need to feed millions of people, much the same way that Zipline has approached this whole problem of supplying or delivering medical supplies. The moment you see, the problem is, okay, even when I first heard about Zipline, I thought that, okay, it's a drone with like rotors in it. And then I saw this, I was like mind blown, because this is an actually massively impactful solution for a problem that a lot of the countries in the world are having. Now in Sri Lanka, thankfully, we don't have to worry about it because we have a really good roads network, and of course our public health service is actually quite advanced. But the moment you go to, let's say, Africa, or for that matter, if you go to a country like Papua New Guinea, where the 4 largest cities of that country aren't even connected with the roads network, I'm not even kidding on this. This particular product, Zipline, can save millions and millions of people who otherwise would die. And they are expanding into the US. And then what happens is the amount of money that you have to spend on like refrigeration, so on and so forth, becomes that much more cheaper, because you can actually now, instead of having like multiple places in a distributed grid, you can just have one single location where you have all your medical supplies in proper refrigeration and all that, and then you can send the stuff that's needed to wherever you want within a few minutes. So this is how we approach these things, and this is how I would like you guys to think about agriculture as well. So it has to be completely innovative. It has to be completely, we have to approach it from a problem solving perspective, not from a solution first perspective, so on and so forth. Now, what's the way forward? Now, for you guys, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. So contrary to the popular belief, agribusinesses are actually very profitable when they are run like businesses. So there's also a lot of scope for agribusinesses, and there's an interesting interest from all types of investors, and this is really important. investors are always thinking about how they can make more money. And as far as investors are concerned, I mean, the earlier crop of tech businesses, it actually gave them a lot of return. If you take Airbnb, if you take Uber, if you take not Apple, Google to Facebook, so on and so forth, yes, these are like app-based products, and all these app-based for like intangible products gave a lot of returns for the investors. But that whole thesis have changed now. People are looking for solutions for bigger problems that people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And also, you definitely need to think about a large number of population, especially within our region, because I mean, there's nothing wrong with us trying to aspire to be a Silicon Valley, but then again, you try to be a Silicon Valley based on whatever the notions that you have about Silicon Valley. While there are so much of problems that we can solve in our countries at a massive profitable rate. So you focus on solving the problems that we have right now, and then you can scale these solutions to countries with similar socio-economical contexts. So, for example, if something works in Sri Lanka, chances are that the same solution can be expanded to, let's say, Bangladesh or Pakistan or Rwanda or Kenya, or for that matter, to Myanmar, to Thailand, so on and so forth. And this is the exact same thing that Zipline guys have done. So they took a working solution from Rwanda, experimented it, it works, and then they try to replicate the same thing in other countries. And we need to think along those lines. We do definitely need that mind shift so that we can do things in a meaningful manner. Nothing wrong with Silicon Valley again, but you have to look at the better solutions. If anyone is interested in, let's say, creating the next Uber for something, again, nothing wrong with it. But then again, there are better problems that can be solved. Okay, so we need more people, especially young people, to focus on agribusinesses. There are so much of problems that needs to be solving, and traditional type of thinking is not going to cut it. Now, the audience that I'm talking to today, you guys probably had a lot of things different to, let's say, me. So my first phone was a dumb phone. It was a Nokia 2100. Then it was a feature phone. And only my last few phones are smartphones. But most of you got a smartphone as your first phone. Okay, so you lived in a completely different reality than to us. And how we approach problems are very different, right? And the sort of knowledge that you get, the associations that you make is very different. So I would really like you guys to think how you can solve some of these larger problems. And I would really like you guys to figure out, okay, how these problems can be solved in such a way that you also can make a viable business out of it. The last one, this is the biggest one. How we solve these agri problems is going to define how we are going to survive as a race. Because one of the biggest problems that we are having right now is the disparity between the rich and the poor. And this disparity keeps increasing. The rich gets richer, the poor gets poorer. And then also what happens as a result of that is the middle class is also dwindling. So what happens is to the progress of an economy, the middle class is really important. But how you create a middle class is creating opportunity for these people. And also food and nurture is really important. Nutrition is really important. So if you solve these problems, if you solve the agri problems, what you will have is you have a lot more people coming into the middle class, and of course a lot of people getting into more jobs, so on and so forth. So as far as I'm concerned, these are some of the way forwards. And with that, with that, I would like to conclude the session today. And if you have any questions, I would like to take them up. So these are my details. Do feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a great session. And now it's time for a quick Q&A session. If the audience have any questions for Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask the questions, or type the questions in the chat box in any language you prefer.
Hi everyone. I'm Protractor Nipunaram Bukkanage, President of Rotary Club of University of California. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Aloka Gunasekara for coming to this session and educating our Rotaractors and non-Rotaractors who are present here. My question is, Mr. Aloka. So in rural areas nowadays, agriculture is very popular, but agriculture technology is somewhat new to them. So in cities and around Colombo, actually technology is popular, but agriculture technology is not that popular. And agriculture is it's not that popular, but they have it. So how to promote this new agriculture technology in Sri Lanka, both rural areas and in around Colombo, and also like how to start up businesses through promoting it around these two areas.
Okay, so so this is obviously a very common observation that most of us make, but you're absolutely right when you say that. I think this is where all of us need to come together, because we cannot solve this problem by being in our own silo of whatever that we do. So I'll give you an example with one of our startups called Tracified. So Tracified is a solution that we use to track food from farm to fork, or like ocean to fork, so on and so forth. Like, it gives you that complete 360 visibility about what went into growing some sort of a crop, what the cold chain was like, so on and so forth. So one of our biggest realizations was that we thought that, okay, there will be some sort of a friction between the people that we work with, especially in the field, to use technology like this. But guess what? It wasn't the case. Like, a lot of these guys wanted to use the technology to better whatever that they're doing. And that was actually a massive eye-opener for us. We realized that, okay, these guys are looking for technology. And when we told them that, hey, look, okay, this is what the technology is, they're like, oh, yes, I understand this. And then they didn't necessarily understand how the smartphones can be used or tabs could be used, but what they did was they pulled their kids and say, hey, look, yeah, you know how to you know how to use a smartphone, so please help me with it. And that worked. Okay, so and this is why, okay, you guys as a generation is really important, because you can look at these different, like, two sides of things and figure out how technology can be used for agriculture progress. And that's really important. So summarizing what I said, okay, so I agree with you with this observation. How do we connect these people? Okay, so those who do agriculture with technology and who do technology without agriculture, how do you combine these two? We have to work together, and there's no other way to do it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. If there's any other question, you can direct it to sir or drop it in the chat box.
Sure.
Hello, Mr. Aloka. This is Sabik Joffer here, and I'm one of the directors at Scale Up and Inoda as a tech company. I have a question. Like, let's say when there is a team who's coming up with excellent idea of agri-tech and with regard to technology and all. So that's, let's say, there are students and newcomers who's coming up with this technology idea, but the problem they have the great idea, but they don't know where to pitch it. Like from where can they get the sponsors or the investments, things, and also in that case, what are the first priorities where they can go and pitch their idea and get some more idea and get some mentorships and plus with the investments?
Okay. So there are two sides to it. As far as pitching it, okay, the first things that you can do is there's enough and more hackathons happening, so you can go ahead and pitch that. And believe me when I say this, okay, don't be afraid to share your idea. Because you see, we make our decisions based on, especially this is very true when it comes to startups, we make our decisions based on the information that we have right at that point. Okay. And what happens is you refine that idea when you have more information coming in. And how you get more information coming in is by talking to a lot of people. And then you figure out, okay, what's their reaction about it, so on and so forth. Right? There's one thing that you have to be very, very mindful about, and that's something called the agreement bias. So when you tell something to someone, the knee-jerk reaction is that they would agree with you. Unless they have enough information not to agree with you, chances are that they will agree with you. And this is a massive problem when it comes to startups. Because most people like, and this has happened to me, I'll give you an example, common example that I give pretty much everyone. So I had an education technology company come to me, I think 2019, and they had this really good product. I like that idea, but then again, I didn't necessarily like that they haven't done their customer research. Asked them to do customer research once. They said, yeah, okay, we'll do it. They just came up with 20 different interviews. I said, okay, this is not going to cut it. You go ahead and do more. They went out, did something like 50 more interviews. And at that point, I was pissed off. I said, hey, look, okay, this is not going to cut it. You have to do more. And if you don't have any tangible numbers coming in, I'm not going to consider your idea. They went out, just of spite of me, just to prove a point. They went and interviewed 1,200 people. Right? And here's what they realized. Their product, yes, absolutely good feedback from the parents because they are the people who pay for it. Students, because they are the people who use it. Teachers, because they are the people who provide the service. Right? Absolutely good feedback from all parents, teachers, and students. Would you use the product? Yes. Everybody said yes. Okay. Do you see the value of it? Yes, absolutely. Everybody said yes. And then at the end of this questionnaire, I wanted them to have this question. Okay, would you pay $5 for the privilege of using this application per month? Out of the 1,200 people, let's just forget about the teachers because they didn't. They are not the people who are paying for it. Parents, and out of the parents and the students, out of the people that they interviewed, only 17 people said that they are willing to pay $5 a month. So imagine if they went ahead with the good feedback that they have gotten about this particular product and developed this particular product, spending their time, effort, and money. They wouldn't have made this determination that, okay, people are not willing to pay that $5. So my suggestion is anyone who's having an idea, just go out and talk to people and try to figure out what their feedback is. Number two, there are so many tools out there, business model canvas, value proposition canvas, so on and so forth. Make use of them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And if you are more serious than that, okay, if you have already done this, you have done your customer surveys, if you have done your business model canvas, so on and so forth, and now you know that, okay, this could work, go to an organization like ICTA because they have something called Spiralation going on. So Spiralation is a incubation program. You apply for that, and regardless whether you are going to get selected or not, they will have some workshops going on. You will learn more. UNDP has another program called National Youth Innovations Challenge, and it's done across the country. Right? Go to these programs, learn how it's done. And then you come to organizations like us, Startup X Foundry. Like we do a lot of incubation, acceleration, investment, and also we help a lot of people, right? You come to us, you ask me these questions, and we'll give you guidance. Because here's the kicker, right? In Sri Lanka, we only have about 2% of the population who are entrepreneurs. And out of that, the startup people are probably like startup entrepreneurs are probably like maybe 600, right? And we need a lot more entrepreneurs to come up, especially from the young people that who are a part of this conversation. If we don't have young people becoming entrepreneurs, it's going to be extremely difficult for us to grow as a nation and make meaningful things to grow our economy. So again, summarizing what I said, I mean, if you have an idea, yes, validate the idea as much as possible. Use things like business model canvas, value proposition canvas, so on and so forth. And third one is, okay, go to programs like Spiralation, National Youth Innovation Challenge, Startup X Foundry, whatever the organizations, and try to figure out how things can be done. There's a question. Okay, yeah, I have a question. So are there any government programs that focus on providing funding to create technological solutions on agriculture? Yes, there are. Spiralation is the one thing that pops into my mind directly. So they give out 1.5 million rupees as seed funding, no questions asked, no equity, nothing. So you can do something really meaningful with that kind of money. And from that point onwards, if you have a good working product, then you have other organizations who are coming in. So you have Lankan Angel Network, who has a land fund going on. That's a 100 million rupee fund. Disclaimer, I happen to be in the investment committee. And also this is a bit of a regret I have. I don't think we do enough. Probably since we don't have enough resources. But yes, I mean, there are so much of opportunities available, especially right now, for agri-related, or for that matter, any sort of tech-related startup in the country. Yeah. Any questions? Any more questions? Also, by the way, since it's organized by Rotaract Club of University of California, Rotaract is quite close to my heart because I happen to be in the committee that revived Rotaract Club of University of California, and also I chartered Rotaract Club of Sentinel United, and I also happen to be the professional development director for the Rotaract district at a certain point. So Rotaract is very close to my heart. Any more questions?
Thank you very much, sir. Are there any more questions that should be directed to Mr. Aloka Gunasekara?
Okay, so yeah. There is a question from Sivam. I think he's still typing it. Oh, I guess he can just unmute himself and speak, I guess. Diniti, can he do that? Like, can he unmute himself and ask the question?
Yes, sir. Yes, of course. He can unmute himself and ask a question,
Okay.
or he can type in the chat box. No issue.
Sure. No, we can't. Sivam, can't hear you.
Hi, Sivam. I think you can type it in the chat box so we all can direct it to sir. I think Sivam is having some issues there. Sivam, can direct the question to us. We will direct it to Mr. Aloka Gunasekara and then get back to you.
Excuse me, Dimity. Selvam texted me his question. Shall I read it out?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Aloka, the question is, how do we get university students to engage with startups? They are looking for jobs with long-term perspective. That is the question.
So how do we get university students to work for startups on a long-term basis? Okay, so that's actually a very good question. In fact, this is one of the problems that we are also trying to solve, because see, one of the biggest challenges here is the risk appetite of a university student. My observation is that especially if you come from a tech track, in terms of your university education, there's more than enough opportunities for you to find a job in a good organization. And this actually puts startups at a massive disadvantage, because obviously the runway that a startup would have is quite short, and the amount of rewards that you can give a university student straight out of university is also quite low. How we solve this problem to a certain extent was by providing the university students with enough incentive to stay with us. So here's what we do right now. What we do is we give these really bright university students a good vesting schedule of equity. Like, okay, yes, they get equity, plus at the same time we give them a vesting schedule, and we explain it to them, like what equity means, how it's important, what vesting schedule is, how that's also important, and what's the return that they are going to get out of it. And we also focus a lot on creating a lot of value for the university students. What I mean by that is, now, any university education is not comprehensive. So it's very rare that you get, now I'm talking about tech startups. Any university student who's getting out of a university wouldn't necessarily know too much about, let's say, how to manage GitHub, or how to manage how to be a really good like a good DevOps engineer, or how to be a good full stack developer, so on and so forth. So what we do is in our startups that we have created, we have a massive focus on getting that knowledge to them. So we have like strong mentoring programs going on with all our startups, and we have like all this knowledge is like curated in platforms that make sense, and we always try to teach them, okay, look, this is how you go about things. Because one of the biggest things that we focus on is like we want the students who are joining a startup to propel their career afterwards, and this is one of the important things that we do, because there are career propellants. So one of the biggest career propellants I know of is McKinsey. So it's a consulting company for those who don't know. So if you join a consulting company like McKinsey, they don't expect you to stay with McKinsey for more than 3 years. But what happens is when you leave McKinsey, you are given a lot of opportunities from other companies to become more than what you were at McKinsey. And McKinsey is completely okay with it. They allow people to have this, and also they are very very proud of their alumni, and they like, okay, yeah, this person was at McKinsey and now he's a CEO of like one of the biggest startups, so on and so forth. They are very very proud of them. And we have taken a leaf out of McKinsey, and we are trying to do the same thing, because obviously we don't have that much of money because we are a startup. Obviously we don't have like the sort of fancy offices that some of these large companies can have. If at all, it's going to be like a small place. Worst case would be like it's going to be like a bedroom, or sometimes it could be like a work from home. But what we are figuring out is that most of these young people, they are also willing to take up that risk, because startups are the cool thing to be. And you also have to create enough value for them so that they will stick with you. So that's one thing that we do. I hope I answered this question.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering all those questions. So, marking the end of a great session conducted by Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, I'd like to thank you for taking your time off your busy schedule to enlighten us and to share your thoughts and experience on the topic of aligning entrepreneurship to solve large agri problems. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. And yeah, I hope I managed to enlighten you with some information and allowing you to think a little differently.
Yes, definitely. Also, we will be updating about our upcoming webinar sessions and details in our social media platforms. So stay tuned. Signing off from today's webinar, I'm Dr. Actor Dinitha Randini Arachi. Stay safe and have a great day.